free to continue saying what you want to say. Just be aware it's live on YouTube. Alrighty, we are now live on YouTube.
Oh, and I hear Elliot's a TikTok star.
Yes, allegedly so. An unwilling TikTok star.
Sorry. Did you say we're live to YouTube?
Yes, I did. Is that embedded in the page, Norm? Oh, yep, I can see it there. I'll just check it and make sure it's live as well. Excellent. Yes, that is live in both YouTube and Artsfront. Great. Alrighty. So I'm going to mute myself now, and we'll just leave it to you to start at midday, Nicole.
Okay.
Oh, we've got ourselves early today, haven't we? We have to have a little chat now.
Yeah, we need some kind of hold music or something in a couple of minutes before we start.
Actually, Nicole, one of the other things that we can do too is if you've got examples of work you want to share, we can add them in the event page as images. So like, I don't know if you're talking about any of the Billy Can stuff or things like that, but can you share some samples of that work or the Landscan stuff?
Oh, well, I wasn't really going to just talk about specifically my work. It was more about just the fact that this is a forum in which we could share work, and I'll just use examples. And Melissa's going to help us out with doing some groovy video flipbook stuff that she's got there. She's got some pictures that she can roll over, so we'll get her to do some demos. But I put a step-by-step in the chat room, so I'll put it right at the top, but I'll crop it and bring it back down if there's any questions in between that time.
And people who can
try it.
Review.
Yeah. Hey, Liz. So I've got 11:58. Is that correct? Or yeah, okay, good.
Yeah.
Synchronized watches.
My mum watching these, and she suggested in this bit, you should read books because she owns a bookshop. So she sent me this.
Can't see it.
Can't see. The background is taking it all in.
I need to know about love. I learned from Little Golden Books. And it's, oh, I don't know, you can't see there.
No, it's been consumed.
No, it doesn't. I don't know why you can't do that. Hang on. I have to take that off, don't I? There it is. Everything I need to know.
Perfect.
It's gorgeous. Anyway, I'm happy to read from the book one day. I was requested by my mother.
What's that? Okay, we might kick off, yeah? Right. Okay. Welcome everyone to today's Little Lunch Online. That's 30 minutes. It's being recorded and streamed live and will be available for view afterwards on www.llol.com.au. Just a little bit of housekeeping and etiquette. Keep your mics off unless you want to actually ask a question or unless you're actually speaking. You're invited to introduce yourself on the Zoom chat down the bottom and say what country you're coming from today, and use the chat to ask any questions, because I'll scroll through those and I can then present those. Click on the captions button to turn on the live captioning. And there's also an Auslan signing. I think it's Peter today, right? Yeah. And so you can click on the video to pin it. I just want to make an acknowledgement for the land of the Kabi Kabi people whose lands I live and work on today. I acknowledge there's ancestors and elders past, present and emerging. Thanks for joining us, and welcome to everyone that's here. And I'm Nicole Voden Cash. I'm a visual artist, sculptor, and I also run an artist-run initiative called Run, ARI. And I've invited Michael Brennan, who's the director of Noosa Regional Gallery, to come join me today, because I've been really concerned about what's going on in this situation with COVID-19 and how it's affecting our industry or our sector in the visual arts, particularly being a static medium. What do we do? You know, galleries are not available. Lots of them are jumping online, but there's lots of, you know, digital dumping, so to speak. And it's really looking at, you know, artists that are already past rather than dealing with the living artists that are trying to cope and deal with the everyday here. So I asked Michael to come and have a bit of a chat about that, and invited lots of other artists that they could actually have a conversation and be in the room. Basically, this is a forum in which you can think out loud and have people available and to express those concerns and issues, or suggest ideas and things we can roll into. Now, I first met Michael when he took up the position at Noosa Regional Gallery some nearly 2 years ago now, and the first thing that he said to me was that he was, you know, an accidental curator. He's an artist himself, and you know, as we do, we all have to find means to an ends to, you know, find work, etc. So he's fallen into curating, but as an artist curator, I think it's a distinct advantage that you have when you understand the making process, you understand the artist. And even though he said he's not making or painting as much as he'd like to paint, he does use artists as his medium. So I've been fortunate enough to be in a show with Michael, or Michael has curated the show, and I feel very much in partnership in that process. So you know, I wanted to talk to Michael because I think he's an ideas man, and that also there might be solutions that we can talk about during this process. I'm going to get everyone to do an experiment later, but I'd just like to say hello to Michael and let him introduce himself a little bit further, and just tell us a little bit about what's going on, being the director of Noosa Regional Gallery, how COVID-19 has affected him and the gallery, and you know, what's going on up there. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Nicole. I'd like to acknowledge as well that I'm coming to you all from my home, which is on Kabi Kabi or Gubbi Gubbi country as well, which is also the place where Noosa Regional Gallery operates from. I didn't know you were taking so close attention to that initial introduction, Nicole, about the fact that, you know, I am an accidental curator in many regards, and particularly that phrase that, you know, artists are the medium that I work with now, I guess, as opposed to painting or sculpting. I like to think of it as a collaborative process, I suppose, as opposed to using artists as my medium, I'd hope. But yeah, look, I think it's really, I feel really privileged to be able to work in that kind of dynamic where someone lets you into their creative space and shares their ideas with you. And obviously, if you bring together a group of artists around a common theme for an exhibition, you've got your own ideas, and it just seems natural to have a conversation with those people that you're working with and see how you can extend each other's ideas and each other's projects. So kind of feel a little bit surprised that I hear that other curators don't always work in that capacity and in that fashion. You know, I think particularly working with living artists and artists who are making new work for new projects, it's a really unique opportunity to share in a creative process that isn't available to people who work almost exclusively with deceased artists. So yeah, that's just a little bit about my working methodology, I guess. As far as my role at Noosa Regional Gallery is concerned, you know, like everyone else, we've been sideswiped by COVID-19, and you know, we've all had to be quite nimble and to react quite quickly. And we also work in a context which is local government. So it's not just like we're making our own decisions about whether we can be open or not, or what our budget implications are, whether we can spend extra money or whether we're getting money taken away from us. That all sits within a larger organisation, and we're being assigned some of the tasks that waste collection and parks and gardens and fine collections are being asked to do with regard to making some budget savings and forecasting about when you can open up again and what that might look like with restrictions in place.
Yeah.
I think one of the first things that we did was to try and look at what we were currently delivering, which was immediately adaptable to an online space, and particularly our public programs. I mean, creating exhibitions and delivering them to the public is one thing, and something which is really at the core of what we do. But we're always trying to find ways where we can find multiple ways into our exhibitions, whether that's for young people or for older people, whether that's for practitioners or whether that's for people who are coming into art galleries for the first time. So increasing accessibility through things like workshops and artist talks has always been important. So those were the first points where we looked at how we can take that activity that we're already doing and push it onto social media and onto our website. When we closed down, we had 2 exhibitions open 1 week prior. We had Mary McQueen retrospective, and I see Duncan's joined on in the audience here today. Hi, Duncan. I worked really closely with Duncan in the development of that exhibition. Yeah. And we also had Rosie Lloyd-Giblet. Now Duncan's been great. Duncan was actually able to, he had an artist talk scheduled for the weekend that we closed, and Duncan was able to kind of pick that up and film his artist talk from home. So that content in many ways now is accessible to more people than it was before, in that it'll have a life ongoing through Vimeo and eventually on our website. But then we started to look at those more interactive activities as well. You know, we do a lot of work with school kids, both high school and younger people. And we do workshops throughout the school terms and across school holidays. So we wanted to see how we could translate those to an online space, but also the capacity for us to then engage some of our local artists in the creation of that material so that we could shoot some income their way. So our first thing was to develop our school holiday programs into both activities that were like downloadable PDFs, but also some video instructions. And we've made those available online and engaging some local practitioners to help with that. And we're in the process, and that should be up next week as well, of doing our after-school art classes, branded Art from Home. It'll be a series of, I think we're 8 or 9 episodes, all filmed by a local artist, so that people can undertake these activities in their own time. It's more focused towards high school kids, that one, but of course, they're the people who are going to be interacting with our public galleries in a very significant way in the next 5 to 10 years. So it's important to keep on engaging with them.
Education's really is the key, isn't it? I mean, we've got to keep educating that audience so that we actually then get more patrons in the future, but also develop our artists from that early sort of age group as well. You know, we spoke yesterday about, you know, the responses that you were doing, which is great because you're still engaging some artists and so forth. But is there any projects that you could think of? I mean, I've been looking at what commissions, what expressions of interests are going on out there. Who's actually commissioning any artists to actually engage in any productivity during this time, so that there is a way that they can make ends meet. And some of them are really amazing, and I will put them up on the chat line, and I'll mention them really briefly, which were things like ACCA have ACCA Open. We have Arts House doing a housewarming commission, which is kind of interesting. Gold Coast I think they've hit the mark with talking about Rage Against the Virus. So, you know, they're really sort of engaging on that comedy way, as well as, you know, supporting artists who are stuck at home to make work about that actual event. Just Horizon this morning from Sunshine Coast Council have just put out and expressions of interest too for, you know, artists working from home and doing things in the next couple of months. But they're really quite thin on the ground. I know money's really stretched. So I suppose it's not trying to find ways of doing things for nothing, or again, we've still got to consider this is a sector in an industry. Where else and what else should we be doing, do you think, Michael?
I mean, I think, you know, paramount is really staying connected. And, you know, forums like this are amazing for that. But, you know, I think we often forget that in an industry, particularly with visual artists who often practice in solitude, often it's visiting exhibitions and attending exhibition openings are the main way to stay connected and to you know, hear what other people, your peers, are doing, to see their work, and where incidental collaborations come about. So it's also the fact, you know, myself included, many artists, you know, aren't necessarily social beings and might be drawn towards solo practices because they feel a little bit more introverted and that sort of thing. So the idea of purposefully making you know, phone calls to people you wouldn't otherwise, or joining on Zoom conversations might not be the natural kind of behaviour for these people to do. But I think, you know, if we're kind of forcing ourselves into these public forums and discussions, that's a really important way to stay connected. And thanks Artsfront for facilitating this, of course, Feral Arts.
I'd have to say the same. It's a great forum, and I think this is one of the first that we've done in visual arts. And as I said earlier, I mean, visual arts, it's not like performing arts or film or music where we can actually put this up visually and you can hear and engage in it. I mean, visual arts is at times quite static, and we do rely on a gallery to actually support that, and a place to actually exhibit it. And it's looking at new ways of, you know, finding those spaces that now are, you know, for the interim are closed. You know, one of the experiments that we were looking at, even using Zoom as one of those potentials, is the sorts of things that we've got up with these virtual backgrounds where people can actually put up imagery of their own work and share it in a gallery type situation. And if everyone could actually try that as an exercise, there's steps in the chat room you can go through and see if you can put up a virtual background of maybe your imagery or just any sort of imagery, so you can see that it can be used as a gallery space. Also that Melissa's got some great imagery. She's done a slide panel as well as she's got a short video. So it actually has the capacity to animate our, what I've been saying is a static industry, being the visual arts, which is great. So there off goes Melissa. She's going to do a slideshow of imagery. And at times, you too, Melissa, you mentioned that it was quite blatant support and all-outs for different artists. So you can actually do some, you know, in-house advertising and direct sell. Not that that's what I encourage all the time, but it's the idea that you've got this forum that we could actually use for sure. You mentioned, Michael, that you might even be using that. You were looking at how you could use that process for maybe have a virtual opening and how that could be managed.
Yeah, absolutely. We're, you know, for the last 4 years, we've held an annual drawing prize, the Lynn McRae Memorial Drawing Award. And this year was scheduled to be the final year, certainly the final year that it's been funded. And rather than cancelling the prize, which you know, a lot of galleries are opting to do, and it's a completely valid decision as well. You know, there's 2 prizes across just Southeast Queensland that I was due to be judging this year, and both of those have been cancelled in the last couple of weeks. We wanted to see if there was a way to adapt the Lynn McRae prize and also the Draw prize, which is the high school equivalent that runs alongside the Lynn McRae, to be able to still go through the kind of critical shortlisting process for entrance, but to find a way to display those works online. So I guess it is an advantage that visual arts in a 2D static medium has, while there's absolutely no substitute to standing in front of a work in a gallery and to be able to, you know, inspect it at your leisure and to see the subtleties of mark making and whatnot. If a 2D artwork is photographed well, then we can still have quite a significant experience of it online. So with Lynn McRae this year, we'll be holding the finalist exhibition exclusively online through the Noosa Regional Gallery website. Entries will be opening up next week, so you'll start to see quite a bit of advertising around the usual avenues for that. But also to increase accessibility, we've elected not to have an entry fee this year. So artists will really have no barriers, hopefully, to submitting work to that prize. And then, yeah, as Nicole was saying, then we've been thinking, can we use a platform like Zoom to have an online exhibition opening for that event, and you know, to have the guest speakers as we usually would in the gallery, and to announce the winner. You know, I think that's a great opportunity, and the way that you might usually break off into small groups in an exhibition opening and talk with your friends about different works, but then come back and when the speeches start, I think if we can emulate that in some fashion, then that would be really beneficial. And it also kind of builds that anticipation that is usually associated with a prize. So that's certainly something that we're looking into doing in the next couple of months.
Oh, that's great. Just a couple of questions in the chat. Elliot also mentioned that, you know, we've obviously got to be careful of copyright issues and so forth if we're putting up images at the back, and NAVA doesn't currently, you know, have a recommended rate for that. So we've got to be mindful of still of our legal situation in those circumstances. And at this stage, because it's a new forum too, it's just finding out how it can actually physically work for an exhibition or for an opening or breakout rooms, etc. Another question too is, there's a couple of other suggested activities from Creative Alliance. Thanks, Katie. And also that the Flying Arts Regional Awards is also still going ahead online. What was this one? Oh, and the blind filmmaker had actually suggested we can actually have it as a descriptive process. So maybe there's an ability to have you know, the words more or the works more accessible through the process of narration in some capacity. Sorry, I'm just reading these straight off the imagery. If you've got any dire questions, please put them up on the chat and I'll get round to them. What is, Alex has got a question. What support is the council now providing? How much has been diverted from the gallery? I mean, that's always a big thing because they do tend to take money away from galleries. I'm writing a snapshot of impacts of advocating state governments for more support for council galleries and museums. So what's happening with Noosa? I'm sure that the impact is being felt with many regional spaces, and this is also going to obviously follow on an impact on our on the artists in our regions.
Absolutely. Look, I think fortunately Noosa's found itself in more broadly as a council in a better economic position than perhaps a lot of local government areas across Queensland and across the country. And I understand there are a few that have actually faced some serious concerns about just having to stand down staff across all sorts of areas of their operations. My understanding is Noosa's in a comparatively healthy financial position overall. Having said that, you know, we're all cancelling programs and we're all being asked to, or postponing programs, and we're being asked to look at our budgets where we can make savings so that the broader community isn't impacted in the long term. You know, any costs or cuts to revenue across council from things like permit applications, right through to, you know, anything really that usually brings in revenue has real impacts on the rest of the ratepayers in the community. And so that's certainly a consideration that has to be taken into account. I've got to say, Noosa Council's been really supportive of the gallery and the entire time I've been there, and continues to be. And I'm certainly not having anything forced upon me as far as budget cuts are concerned. We're all just being asked to be realistic and honest about those impacts, but those are expense-based impacts and revenue-based impacts. So, you know, it goes both ways for the gallery at the moment. So really our adjustments are being made more around the physical limitations about not being allowed to bring people into the space, rather than financial implications for the council more broadly. The other thing I'd really like to say is, from the executive team down, it was really highlighted as one of the two things that we really wanted to achieve across the council was to look after our local community and look after our staff. And so, I've got kind of 3 key groups of people that I've been thinking about over the last month and a half, 2 months. I'm thinking about our staff, I'm thinking about our audiences, and I'm thinking about the artists that we work with. And if I can turn my attention to making sure that all those people are cared for to the best of our ability in these strange circumstances, then I think that really should be a priority of all galleries, all regional galleries out there.
Leah had a question. I don't know whether Leah's popped out for the moment. Let me just see whether she's still there. And Melissa's got a question. Melissa, do you want to ask a question?
Thank you. Yeah, look, and great conversation. I just wanted to know if sales of artwork for artists would be a direct way to get money to their pockets. So is there any credible online platform that you have found would work for them?
I've personally found that, there were platforms out there prior to this happening, and some of them more successful than others. I've often found in the past that the online platforms that artists have success selling their work tend to be for certain types of art practices, and particularly those that are, palatable, for want of a better word, those that might tend towards the decorative arts rather than, say, the conceptually and critically engaged art practices. So there's certainly, spaces out there where artists had been selling works all around the world, Blue Thumb, for example, or the Saatchi platforms. People continue to sell work through those sites. But I think the challenge is in, for a 3D artist, for example, it's difficult to represent your work online in those sorts of spaces, or artists who are working where, conceptual basis is more important. Those sites kind of haven't always attracted the art collecting audiences who are interested in art practices, which are critical in the way that they engage with contemporary society. So, having said that, we're at the gallery at the moment. We've always tried to support local practitioners by stocking our gift shop with, ceramic works and jewellery works and small-scale artworks. That's an avenue which is closed for us, but we're undergoing a redesign of our website in this unusual period, and we're looking at bringing far more e-commerce capability into it, so that we'll be able to probably open up our gift shop before the gallery physically reopens as well, with a focus on works by local makers. So I think that's really important. And I noticed that the Butter Factory in Koroy as well was really fast on their feet to achieve that. So, there's a number of public galleries out there still trying to support income streams for artists, particularly in their local areas. For us, one of the other things that we're really trying to do is to have a focus on postponing engagement with artists as opposed to cancelling where possible. That might mean in the future that we're shortening exhibition timeframes and, prioritising significant projects with artists as opposed to council-initiated projects. It's certainly easier to work with collections for many organisations because the stuff is there and it's accessible and it's static. But I think, if we can try and contribute to the idea that this is a temporary blip in artist incomes as opposed to a cancelling of it for a period.
Which is great, Michael. Leah's got a question for you. I think she is back. Yes, Leah.
I am back, yes. Hi, Michael.
Hey,
that
Leah.
Was, really, really fascinating to hear all that. Thank you. I guess I was just curious, from your perspective, you've sort of answered this already, but, how would you feel, or from your perspective, would be some of the best ways that other local organisations or institutions, I guess, particularly USC, speaking with my USC hat on, could support the gallery and local artists right now, from your perspective?
Look, there's a couple of things there. I guess it's important to be able to in what's really a completely uncertain time, you know, I've got no idea when our gallery is going to open again. You know, I really have no idea. To try and be able to bring something a little bit concrete to artists in projects, and if that means being able to confirm exhibition opportunities for 12 months time or 18 months time and lock them in, and perhaps even be able to bring forward, you know, deposit payments for engaging artists in those projects, you know, that kind of helps with a couple of different things. It gives artists something to work towards, and, you know, a project to be engaged with, even if it is a longer term project and something that's further away. But to be able to confirm that engagement with a deposit payment for the services, I think, you know, that also brings some financial relief as well. So I think that's one way that public galleries can continue to support artists, even though they're not conducting their core business. But also, you know, we're trying to do as much as we can in the social media space of sharing profiles and sharing projects, just so the broader community, people are spending more time on social media than they ever did before, and before they were spending a lot of time. So, you know, it's an exponential increase, no doubt.
That whole idea of supporting people through social media is something that, you know, isn't quantifiable, so to speak. So it's great that if you've got artists that you can actually then showcase and do some of that marketing and some of that showcasing for them is fantastic. And we don't have a great deal of time left, but there are the Australia Council Resilience Funds that are available. There's also $1,000 grants from the Maya Foundation. You know, I suppose it's still looking at what can we do for artists right now. And I suppose it's only just, as I said before, there's quite a number of expressions of interest for artists to continue to make while we're in isolation, and finding funds for them to continue to exist. A lot of them are, you know, lost their jobs, but they've also lost then the capacity to make. What can we do maybe to build ourselves up in the future? I know you're saying that from the gallery, but maybe coming from the perspective of as a curator / artist in that position, what would you think you would be doing?
I mean, it's an ideal time to be making, I guess, and, you know, that's not discounting the stresses that everyone's feeling, and, you know, the impacts on mental health and the disconnection from people, even if you weren't a particularly connected person in the first place. But you know, we had a brief discussion about this yesterday, Nicole, and without downplaying any of those, you know, mental health concerns, I think a lot of artists are uniquely equipped to use their creative practice and their creative outlet to have an understanding of themselves and their position in the world in this really stressful time. So, you know, to continue making is such an important activity.
Isn't it? For mental health, for well-being, for all of those things, I mean, you know, it's my drug of choice. I mean, I wouldn't not keep making regardless of what situation, whatever time I find myself in. Melissa was mentioning the fact that, you know, maybe organisations like Nexus and other organisations around Queensland and across Australia that have DGR status may be able to connect with different philanthropic or philanthropists themselves that might be able to create some sort of, what did you say, keeping connected action. Oh, sorry, that's from Elliot. It's going too quick, I can't read it in time. That could help them make bigger work, or commission work specifically, like targeting specific artists and getting them to produce work during that period of time. And of course, it always comes down to funding and or the lack of it. But that's a great idea, Melissa. Thank you for that. Artists who are at risk of losing their internet connection too, there's also can apply for keeping connected action on Arts Front, so as a philanthropic side of things. I also heard the ABC Triple J was actually calling for expressions of interest for anyone that needs materials or computers to continue to make music. Obviously, that's not our visual arts industry, but there's lots of people now coming to action to actually help support artists of all different genres and from all different sectors to get them through this crisis and help them stay connected, because the worst part is not having good internet and or being able to have these Zoom chats and, you know, times, what did we call them before? The times to talk out loud. And it's not very often that we can have a conversation with a gallery director and all sit in the same room and you know, be able to throw questions at you. So that was fantastic, Michael, for making yourself available today. And I think we're basically out of time. Yes. Could councils help with advocacy in state government and federal government? Is that the last question that we've got there? It's really about that advocacy for artists and while we're working under these conditions and through this process. How can we advocate, particularly through local government?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a time, I suppose, where we're all very stretched as well with our time. Amazingly, even though we're not open, we're busier than ever, and yeah, it's difficult to be facing all directions at once. And there's lots of priority decisions that need to be made. I mean, one thing that we've been able to do is to kind of write letters of support for artists who are requiring, you know, funding relief, I suppose, or special purpose funds. So from a gallery perspective, we're able to do small things like that. Look, I certainly think local governments will have a role to play with this, and moving forward through the recovery phase as well, really trying to champion projects which bring arts back into the community and create spaces where conversations can occur again around these important issues, and a time for healing as well from this. So I think this will be an ongoing project. It, you know, it might be getting overshadowed by some of the more immediate tasks right now, but I don't think it's something that local governments will shy away from, and I think it's an activity they'll certainly be able to play a part in.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. We do have to go, and we just do a bit of a shout out and say thank you, Michael, for coming, and everyone else participating. Catch up with you later.